Yeah, muy bien.
No.
This is great, mate. Thank you so much for making the time. I'm very excited to speak with you. People are starting to join in. Good morning,
You are
everyone.
in Melbourne?
Based in actually in Newcastle, which
Newcastle.
is
Okay.
just north of Sydney, about
Yeah,
2 hours
I
north of
lived in
Sydney.
Sydney some years ago.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
What brought you over
I
to
was
Sydney?
with a, well, we can talk about it later, but I
Yeah.
was with a software company that acquired its distributor in Melbourne, and they needed somebody to run the business, and so I was the first one to raise my hand. And so
Awesome.
my wife and I headed down to Sydney right before the Olympics.
Nice one.
Mhm.
Oh, very, very good. Nice memories, I'm sure. Really great
Yeah.
spot. All right, this is great. So we are
Mm.
on. We have people joining, and I just put something on the chat to say good morning, everyone. Where's everyone joining from? All right, we'll kick off. Welcome.
Well, let's
This
see,
is
I'll
Felipe
open up the chat
Flores.
so I can keep an eye on it here as well.
Right, this is great that we can both be interacting. And Dan's here. Good man. From Newcastle, you got people from Sydney, from Melbourne. Great. So, hi, this is Felipe Flores. Welcome to another episode of Data Futurology. Today, we're going to be speaking about data monetization, data management, measurement of the value of the data, and how we can think about data as an asset and as a competitive advantage for our organizations, and how we can really put data into that asset class that organizations have, where data is often spoken about as an asset class, but not in a lot of places not yet put into the right place as an asset. For that, we got Doug Laney. He is a Data and Analytics Innovation Fellow at West Monroe, author of Infonomics, also a lecturer at the University of Illinois, and has a course on Coursera on this topic. Doug, you've been doing this for over 20 years. I always enjoy the conversations with industry veterans, and in your case, you've given so much to the industry over time. Starting with coining Infonomics over 20 years ago, I think you brought in the discussion about the 3 V's of big data. Mate, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
The pleasure is mine, Felipe. Thank you.
This is great. So I was thinking for the I think few people that may not know you, could you give us a quick overview of your background, and then really keen to get into Infonomics and your thoughts there.
All right. So I grew up here outside Chicago, and for those of you who are viewing, you can see the skyline that's from our roof deck here in Chicago, on the north side of Chicago. So it's the view of the skyline. But I've moved around a bit. I've lived in Ottawa and in Denver and San Diego and Sydney. Bit of time in Brazil as well, and also in Auckland. I think that pretty much covers it. But family's here in Chicago, so it keeps bringing us back. I started my career with then Arthur Andersen, before it was even Andersen Consulting. So I was with Arthur Andersen Consulting. And West Monroe, interestingly enough, is a consultancy somewhat born from the ashes of Arthur Andersen. Many of you know Arthur Andersen kind of went defunct after the Enron fiasco. And so some people from Arthur Andersen decided to build a different kind of consulting firm, and so that's what we're with. So I've kind of come full circle a little bit, as it were. I studied at the University of Illinois in Champaign. It was probably the top 3 or so computer science school in the country at the time. And being a state school, it was nice and inexpensive. So that was great. And I studied math and computer science, but quickly I found that the math was a little bit too hairy for me. And I was more interested in the business aspects of computing, having been involved in kind of a business club in high school. And but at the time, the university didn't have an MIS type of degree, a management information systems degree. that kind of combined business and computer science. So I designed one, and it was unanimously rejected by the committee because they said, why would anyone want to use computers for business? This was 1984. It was an engineering school, so give them a break. But anyway, we got finally got it approved, and I ended up getting a degree in what I call software engineering and business administration. So yeah, off I went into the real world. So I spent a number of years at Anderson Consulting, and then went into the expert systems world, working with some AI startups, and kind of became interested in how data needed to be organized in order to process rule-based engines and natural language applications and things like that. So that kind of got me into, involved in the data world. I guess at Anderson Consulting as well, I was the data administrator on a 400-person project for Sears. We were rebuilding Sears, one of Sears' major applications. And so yeah, I always had kind of an interest in data, but it actually goes back to my interest in data and information really goes back, as I write in my book, goes back to the story when I was 5 years old. My father woke me up out of bed and he said, "Douglas, it's time." I said, "Okay." So we went down to the television and adjusted the rabbit ears on the black and white television set, like millions of people, billions of people around the world were doing. And we said, "Don't ever forget that you saw this." And we watched the first steps of the moon. We watched the moon landing.
Amazing.
The first steps on the moon. And there's a great Australian movie about the moon landing, The Dish. You know that film?
No.
Wonderful, hilarious, kind of a comedy about one of the satellite dishes. I forget what the town was outside of Sydney, maybe 100 miles inland, and about the people who ran this satellite dish to capture the images while the Earth was, away, while North America was facing away from the moon. Anyway, great film. But my father, who was a world-class engineer, as I wrote in the book, he was more impressed by the fact that we were seeing this and that the information about the moon landing was streaming into our living room than he was about all the electromechanical components that enable us to get there and land and return. So I guess that made an impression on me from a young age, and I was always interested in collecting information and making lists and things like that. So here I am today.
It's amazing. So Kim says that it was The Dish in Parks,
right?
Parks, New South Wales.
Thanks, Kim. Sam Neill, great film. I love Sam Neill.
Yeah. Oh yeah, same. I haven't seen that one. Oh, great.
Even though he's not Australian, but he's a good guy anyway, right? I think he's actually Kiwi, right?
All right. Yeah, nice one. Yeah. And man, that is impressive. So and for the before we jump in, for the people that may not know Infonomics and this term,
I'll show you a copy
this
of the book
mindset. Yeah, go for it.
All right, here we go. I should have had it ready. There's the book. Oh, it's not showing up on the, because I've got a background. Anyway.
We'll put the link to the book on the show notes, and and I saw that it's also on Audible, which is great
and
for people.
Ebook, Audible, and hardcover.
Amazing. So for the people that don't know Infonomics, could you describe it for us?
So Infonomics is the concept of managing, monetizing, and measuring data as an actual asset. There's a lot of people today talk about data as an asset, but they don't actually really treat it like one. And we can kind of get into the reasons of why. But about 20 years ago, the background on kind of the story is the 9/11 terror attacks. I don't know if you knew that, but I was an analyst with Gartner, the IT research and advisory firm, with a large presence in Australia as well. And some clients started contacting us in the aftermath, lamenting not only the tragic loss of life, but also the loss of their data. Right? This was in the days before a lot of cloud and a lot of offsite backups. So a lot of the companies in the Twin Towers in New York lost their data, and it became a real existential event for them. They didn't know who their customers were. They didn't have contracts. They lost all sorts of records. They didn't know who their employees were. They lost employee records. And so naturally what they did, some of these companies, was submit claims to their insurance companies for the value of the data they lost.
Mm-hmm.
And the insurance company said, sorry, we don't consider data to be property, and therefore it's not covered by your property and casualty policies. So that kind of caught my attention, and I was like, wow. Okay, well, boom. And I said, I always thought data was an asset. So I crack open my accounting books, and I learned that an asset is something that is owned or controlled, exchangeable for cash, right? And is something that generates probable future economic benefits. Mm-hmm. Well, there's no argument that data meets the criteria of an asset. It's just that it's never been recognized as one by the accounting profession. And so as I start to look into this, lo and behold, the insurance industry in the US updates the standard policy template that's used by all insurers to explicitly exclude electronic data from insurance policies, from property insurance policies. They did that a month after 9/11. And then, not to be outdone, the accounting industry, a couple of years later, the accounting profession globally decided, well, if data is not property, we're not going to recognize it as an asset. And therefore, even if you wanted to include the value of your company's data assets on your balance sheet, you now no longer can do that.
Yep.
Right. And then the courts got involved, and the courts are confused on the matter. The U.S. government got involved on how to update a 1930s style accounting system into the 21st century. And of course, given that it was a government hearing, of course, nothing ever happened from that. Mm-hmm. And so here we are today with most companies trying to become more data driven, more data savvy, wield data as an actual asset, but are being held back by the keepers of the definition of what constitutes property and what constitutes an asset. And so Infonomics kind of cuts through that and says, listen, forget about what the accountants and the lawyers and the insurance companies say. It's incumbent upon you as a business in today's data-driven economy to actually treat data as an asset. Now, the problem is that because there's no imperative to measure data, right? There's the old adage, you can't measure what you don't manage, right? Or you can't manage what you don't measure. And because companies don't measure their data, they don't manage it as well as they should. And because they don't manage it as well as they should, they're not able to monetize it or generate as much value from it. So it becomes a vicious cycle for many companies. And the idea behind Infonomics is to kind of reverse that curse and make it more of a virtuous cycle.
That is fantastic. And I really like that you've brought really good structure and frameworks to what is often a problem that that is quite threatening for people, or quite intimidating, I should say, quite intimidating to jump into, because they see it as so amorphous and hard to grapple with. But could you tell us about some of the things that you've seen companies implement when it comes to getting into Infonomics and how that's worked for them?
Well, I mean, there have been some tremendous examples of how companies have generated measurable value from data. And I haven't been involved in all of them. But over the past, let's say 10 years or so, I've compiled over 500 stories of how organizations are using data and analytics in innovative and high value ways. And so I'm actually finishing up a next book on that.
Great.
I'm not sure what the title is going to be, but something around, the art of the possible with data or something like that. And interestingly, so the book is going to have these use cases in it, but then I've also conscripted 100 of my friends around the industry to provide commentary on each of these stories. Yes. So it's not only going to be a book of stories, but a book of ideas from 100 different data and analytics experts around the world. Not just, I could have just written it myself and analyzed all the stories myself, but that would have been kind of it ended up, it would have been a bit homogeneous, right? So, so there's some great stories in the book of companies using data in innovative ways. Most recently, I've worked with a large retailer who is trying to prove the benefits of its data governance operation, and and so we adapted some of the data valuation models that I published in Infonomics to help them quantify the economic value of certain data governance, functions and metrics. I worked recently with a large pharmaceutical company that's been in the news a lot lately, and I helped them quantify the value of their data to help them justify licensing it and also ingesting it into their data lake and data warehouse. So to kind of prove the benefits of that data. I worked with a wholesaler, a large wholesaler, multi-billion-dollar wholesaler, to help them ideate around new ways to generate value from their data. And in fact, most of my work right now with West Monroe is working with clients to help them generate business cases and use cases and ideas about how to generate new data-driven value streams. And so for this wholesaler, we ended up coming up with just the top 3 ideas where they estimated, this is their CFO, estimated the value of these use cases at over $100 million. Annually to the business.
I believe
so
it.
There's just a lot of latent data, a lot of underutilized data out there within organizations. And I think I think there's an imperative for companies to think about how to evolve their data center from a cost center into a value center, into a profit center. And that's really kind of the goal of the whole data monetization approach that I've written about and now I'm in consulting on.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. And so really keen to get into the valuation of the business and creating business ideas and business cases for data monetization. Before that, I wanted to ask you about what do organizations need to implement or what functions should they be considering in order to be able to make the most, to do Infonomics well, to be able to get value from the data. And I love that you have a holistic perspective that includes the technology, the technical, the business. So what do you think businesses should implement, or what type of organization?
There's a lot of things that have to go right. Yeah, and so. I'm not going to say, data science and analytics is the easy part, or technology is the easy part. It's difficult, but I think the most difficult parts are the human aspect of analytics, and that is actually implementing the ideas. There are so many great ideas out there, and I've helped companies generate hundreds or maybe thousands of ideas on how to leverage their data in new and innovative ways, but it's taking those ideas from conception into actual action that is the hard part. I think the big issue right now is the lack of data literacy, the lack of understanding of the power and value of data, or how to take those next steps to take your data and take your analytics into a more operational realm within the organization. And so we're doing a lot of work with clients to help them raise their level of data literacy. In fact, I just gave a data literacy program to the senior executives at one of Latin America's largest conglomerates, and to help them fully understand, what does data mean? What is data architecture? Why is it challenging? Why use a pie chart versus a bar chart versus what's a bubble chart? And how to communicate with data, and how to communicate with data people about what your needs are, how to generate hypotheses. Too many companies are stuck building pretty pie charts and bouncy bar charts and dashing dashboards that really just inform people, but they don't diagnose anything. They don't really predict anything. They don't prescribe anything. They don't automate anything. And so I think there's really an imperative to move up that analytic value chain. And without a good smattering of data literacy and understanding of the differences between those styles of analytics, it's hard for a company or hard for business executives to get there. I think it's also become difficult. It's difficult to decouple data and technology. I listened to, and I just listened to a speaker last night, and I listened to these news broadcasts, and everybody refers to Google and Facebook and Uber as technology companies. They are not technology companies. They're data companies. They have almost no technology or very kind of insignificant technology. They're data companies. And so to continue to refer to them as technology companies perpetuates this notion of the coupling of data and technology. And companies that are doing a really good job, and I remember down in Australia, and I don't know if they mind me mentioning them, but Kohl's, Kohl's grocery department store, did a great job of bifurcating their data and technology organizations, where there's a CIO or a CTO who's managing technology and a chief data officer who's responsible for the data assets. There once was a day where it made sense for data and technology to be tightly coupled. The database was buried within the application, but today that's not the case. And if we really want to expand the ways that we're leveraging data, we need to decouple it from technology, not just physically, but mentally, conceptually as well, and organizationally.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the organizational change sends such a strong signal of where the organization wants to be, and that definitely starts to go into the culture. So tell me about the data valuation side, and how can people tackle that problem when obviously when there's so much data that an organization might have. How can they jump into it?
Yeah. So working with some of the companies in the Twin Towers after 9/11, we had to help them figure out how to understand the cost of the data that was lost. And there's a couple of different ways we looked at it. One was, what did it cost you to generate or collect that data in the first place, right? And the second was, what was the loss, the business, the impact on the business from the loss of that data. So we looked at that a couple of different ways, but then I quickly realized that there are other ways to value any asset. There's the cost approach. There's also the market approach. So what is that asset's value in a open marketplace? What can you sell for it? What can you trade for it? And then there's the income approach. What is that asset's contribution to a revenue stream or to expense savings? And so those are the main ways that accountants or valuation experts value any kind of asset. And they're just as applicable to data as they are to any other asset. It's just, again, that the accounting profession doesn't really support this notion. So I've been working with companies to help them understand it and juxtapose those. So like, if your data costs you this much to generate, well, or collect, you want to generate more value. You want to generate margin on top of that. So you want to find new ways to leverage data. And the good news is that data is what economists would call a non-rivalrous, non-depleting, regenerative asset. So it's unlike oil. People often talk about data as being the new oil, and that's kind of somewhat ridiculous because when you consume a drop of oil, it goes away. You can only consume a drop of oil one way at a time. And when you consume oil, it doesn't create more oil. Data is very different in that regard. And companies that get that are building really winning business models. And I'm not just talking about the Digerati or the Facebooks and Ubers, but companies internally are finding ways to leverage data in multiple ways simultaneously and continuously, and use that data to create more data, to create kind of a flywheel effect, as Jeff Bezos refers to at Amazon. And so that's where the kind of the magic happens.
I love it. I love all the different perspectives because it definitely helps clarify. and this is some another part of the framework that you've developed and helped bring to people that is so helpful. And I would always, at least in my case, I find that coming across your books, your book. Some time ago, at least a year ago. I know it's been out for 2 or 3 years. I remember thinking, I wish I read this earlier. In particular, I went into to work at a big bank, one of the largest in Australia, and I was on the B2B side, so business to business, very large corporate multinationals, publicly listed companies, and people internally in the bank and externally told me, why are you going there? As a head of data science, there's no data there. They have 30,000 customers. Crazy. What we ended up doing is leveraging the data from the retail division, specifically credit cards, account transactions, analyzing it to help those business customers make decisions on where to put their next mobile phone towers, where to open their next shop, how to better manage inventory according to the people that are going to their stores. And that was a big success, and we ended up building that as a in the organization as a big offering and a team, and definitely like went on to generate over $100 million. So as you were talking about the other example, I was like, I totally see it. But my question is that I see it now in retrospect, and when I went into that role, it took me a long time to see it, to see the potential, to think about what we could do, and then a long time to make it happen. And that's where I was like, I should have read Doug's book earlier. That would have been amazing.
Well, I tell you, my book doesn't solve the problem on how to move the corporation, right? It gives you some methodologies on how to become more, how to kind of measure your maturity and mature on multiple dimensions, including culture. But it's not really a cookbook on data literacy or change management.
No. But tell me about the either the idea generation or where to focus the efforts on getting value out of data.
So I'll tell you a little bit about the workshops that I run, and they're based on kind of the outline that I created, documented in the book. So the first step is to run these workshops on generating ideas. And so we like to get business leaders, people who understand the data, and ideally a key customer, supplier, partner in the room as well, because we might want to develop data products for them. And so we run through a number of exercises. The first one is kind of laying out all the data, like what data do we have? If we intersected it in new and innovative ways, we might learn something, or be able to create a new kind of saleable data product. So it's really just kind of making sure everybody in the room understands what data is available. And we're not only looking at what data is available within the four walls of the organization, but what data is available externally as well. I tell companies your biggest data asset is probably not one that you're managing yourself. Your biggest data asset is out there in the world. It's social media data. It's about yourselves or your customers or your competitors. It's open data sources from government and other public entities. It's thousands of data brokers who are harvesting and collecting and packaging up unique data sources to provide insights. It is they say open data, social media. There's web content that can be harvested. So scraping others' websites can gather a lot of data as well. So companies that are looking externally are really benefiting today, especially in times like these, where COVID, where the pandemic has broken almost every company's forecasting models, right? Especially if those forecasting models are based on their own historical data and not open to or considering what's happening in the world at large. We refer to that as the difference between trend-based modeling and driver-based modeling. So companies that have trend-based models that primarily look at their own data, those models are broken. They're simple models and they're pretty much broken today. Companies are trying to evolve now to more driver-based models where they look externally for leading indicators of their business, right? And that's not an easy switch to make, right? Data scientists can certainly help do that, but you need a lot of data to do that. And if you don't have anyone curating data, if you don't have a data curator, right, in your organization, then it's going to be very hard to identify and find those data sources. They've called data scientists the sexiest job of the 21st century, right? I think probably close behind is the data curator or the data librarian, right? Most companies have an entire department dedicated to procuring, to procuring office supplies, right? You can't see them, but don't have a single person dedicated to procuring data supplies. That's a tragic mistake in today's world.
Hugely tragic. And we are getting questions from the audience, which is fantastic. Okay. So we're using the Q&A functionality. And related to this one, Ron asks, how do we reconcile data with intellectual property?
Yeah, so intellectual property takes a couple different forms. There's tangible and intangible, intellectual property. And so let's just focus on the tangible intellectual property like patents or copyrights or trademarks. That's a great question because those are all recognized intangible assets on the balance sheet, right? And so I think there's no reason why data shouldn't be a recognized intangible asset as well. Yeah, I mean, I think they're great examples of why we should be recognizing data as an asset.
Yeah, no, 100%. And when you were talking about, the first party, second party, and third party data, and focusing on leading indicators, yeah, I really like the view that you put forward. And within that, you also spoken about getting more second party data and sometimes even having bartering transactions where we'll help you acquire some more data. Could you tell us?
That's right. We didn't talk about all the ways to monetize data. So, I've kind of broken them down into a couple main forms or patterns. And this comes from analyzing all of these use cases that I've compiled, and I've determined that there's about 8 or 9 kind of standard, use kind of patterns to this. The obvious ones are using data internally, or I call indirect data monetization, where you're improving the performance of a business process or improving a relationship, right? Or using data to identify new markets or new product opportunities, things that are more intrinsic to the business. And then there's direct data monetization, which is more external, where you're selling data products, selling insights to others. And not necessarily selling them for cash, but maybe bartering for goods and services. There's a particular advantage to bartering with data for commercial favors or goods and services. And that is, you avoid the tax implications of that. So if you're selling data for cash, it lands on the income statement. If you are trading information for better commercial terms or in return for some goods and services, that doesn't hit I'm not here to give tax advice, but that doesn't hit the income statement. A classic example of that is you go into the, where's my card here? You go into the grocery store and you scan your loyalty card, right? You are getting a discount on groceries. But we all know what's really happening. What's really happening is we're exchanging information about us and our purchase for free food. It's a barter transaction. If we use cash, we wouldn't get that discount, right? We wouldn't get that free food. But because we're using our loyalty card or even a credit card, maybe we're getting something in return. So we know the grocery store is using that data to grow its business in some way, or maybe even selling that data to other data product companies. But we don't care. We're getting free food from it.
Exactly.
So that kind of thing is starting to happen more and more in the business world as well, where businesses are realizing that they are sitting on a gold mine of data that maybe has particular value for them, but maybe much larger value to partners or suppliers or customers or others. So that you can barter with data, you can sell data, you can put it on marketplaces. There are marketplace applications like Dowex and demist data and others where you can resell your data. Eagle Alpha is one that resells to the trading firms. And then there's kind of a new way that we've identified, certainly due to privacy regulations. Companies are hesitant to avail their customer data, right? And obviously regulations about selling your customer data due to privacy regulations. And when companies come to me and they say, yeah, we can't monetize our customer data because of GDPR or whatever regulation, I say, well, you're just not thinking about it creatively enough. I can't sell you my customer data, but I can sell your stuff to my customers, right?
Yeah.
And take a referral fee or a commission on that. So an example is we're working with a hospital. Obviously can't sell its patient data, but this hospital knows who its diabetes patients are, right? And it can't sell that data to anybody, but it can sell them healthy meal plans or gym memberships or at-home glucose monitoring, testing kits, and then take a piece of that action, right? And it's a win-win-win for everybody. The diabetes patients get better services, not just hospital services.
Yep.
The companies that are making products to serve that population, grow, and then the hospital itself gets a cut. And certainly here in the U.S., and I don't know about other parts of the world, but hospitals are paid more on patients who don't return for the same condition within a certain period of time.
Yep.
It's the Affordable Care Act, or known as Obamacare here. So there's really an incentive to keep people away from the hospital. And if this can help them do that, then it helps them make even more money. So I refer to that as inverted data monetization.
Yeah, exactly. And I used to work in finance. Now I'm working in healthcare, and we're working with hospitals, and it's all about that, helping avoid the readmission for the same condition. So this is an excellent example.
Readmission, that's the word I was looking for.
When I worked in banking, what we did was, for people that got a new home loan, we worked with furniture companies to give them specific offers to people getting the new home loan and trying to tie it that way. Yeah, which worked really well. And that's what cases where I was like, I wish I read Doug's book earlier.
Right. So here's the thing: companies get fixated on doing this one way, on monetizing their data one way. And again, because it's this non-rivalrous, non-depleting asset, you should be thinking about any and all ways that you can monetize your data, not just get fixated on one of them.
Exactly. Yep. And another one that you described that I really like is the value add. And I've spent most of my time working on B2B side, and whenever I've myself and my teams, whenever we've developed new products, we've started as being a value add typically on top of the company's more profitable products, in order to get more customers to take that up, and then build it to a point that the product stands up on its own. Sorry?
I didn't even mention that. That's one of the other ways, which is baking data into a product or service. So if you've got a product or service, and you can infuse data or analytics into that product or service to make it that much more valuable or useful or differentiated from others, that's another way to monetize your data.
Yeah. And in my case, because I've spent most of my time in B2B, I find that I think about those type of value add and uses of data. But on the B2C side, there's so much I think that can be done, and so much more that can be done by providing people that end-to-end service, which is really good. Is there anything on monetizing information that we haven't covered yet, do you think?
No, but I want to go back to valuing data a little bit.
Yes.
I talked about ways to financially value data, but there are other ways to value data as well that companies need to be thinking about, and that is generating data quality metrics on data, understanding data's relevancy or potential value to one or more business processes, and looking perhaps at its impact on non-financial key performance indicators. And where things get really interesting, and I hadn't even anticipated this, but many of my clients who are using these models are starting to juxtapose them in innovative ways. They are identifying, like one company identified data that has a low economic value, right? A low financial value in terms of what it's delivering to the bottom line, but has a high degree of relevancy across the business. And so they said, well, that's data that is underperforming for us. So we need to find ways to better utilize that data. This is a manufacturing company of security systems. And they said, we're not going to change the business at all. We're just going to better use the data that we have throughout the organization. They ended up adding $300 million of market value on a $2 billion business after they implemented these ideas. Another company took another approach, which was, we've got all this data and it's costing us money. Let's look at ways to leverage it. Well, we're in a regulated industry. We're an energy company. And so we can't really do more with this data than we're already doing. So let's just make a defensible deletion or defensible disposal business case to offload this data that we don't need and that we're not using, and it's costing us more than the value it's generating. They're saving millions of dollars a year in unnecessary infrastructure costs.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I love that example. Keep going. Sorry.
So there are all sorts of innovative ways that clients are juxtaposing these data valuation models to drive certain kinds of behaviors internally. That's been really heartwarming to see. I just wrote about a new way that Highways England is using to value its data. I wrote about that in Forbes last month.
Yeah, amazing. And how are they going about it?
They took a more of a kind of interesting and kind of in-depth approach I'm not going to get into here, but the chief data officer there used this approach to radically change the culture in the organization.
Yeah, amazing.
It's been amazing to see. Yeah.
We'll put the link on the show notes, because that is amazing. We've got a few more questions here from the audience. One is about data governance. So it says, how do we get our organization to understand data governance? How would you approach setting up a governance team and start the journey to appreciating data value?
Yeah. So making the business case for data governance, maybe as simple as saying, hey, there are certain regulations that we need to adhere to, and we have no business process or no operating model to ensure that we're adhering to the ways that this data needs to be managed or handled. So that's the first way. The next way is to identify anecdotes where there have been data quality issues or data mismanagement or mishandling kind of issues, and use those anecdotes to set up a program. But I think that it's just as important to measure things, to measure data quality and measure the impact of poor data quality on the business. And that actually can be done. And the valuation models that I published include ways to value certain kinds of data quality characteristics like accuracy and completeness and timeliness and integrity and scarcity and believability and so forth. So, and then tying those to the business processes that are using that data. One financial services company, AIG, their chief data officer identified data that was they actually tied data governance, data quality metrics to business process improvement. So he can now track how a 1% increase in data accuracy or a 3% increase in data completeness affects the business processes that use that data. So I don't think there's any better way to build a business case or prove the value of data governance. Now, setting it up is a whole nother thing. How do you create that operating model? How do you assign the different kinds of roles like data stewards? I just give people a few kind of tidbits of maybe unconventional wisdom on data governance and that is the role of the data steward is pretty well defined, and I won't go into detail on that, but somebody creates the data definitions and policies around the data. I think it's important to have those data stewards also become data advocates. They should be tasked with and incentivized on helping the business use that data more than they are, not just govern it better. There's an offense and defense side to data stewardship. The second is the concept of the data owner. And the first thing everybody wants to do when they set up a data governance program is assign owners to data. And I think that concept of an owner is, the concept is good. Somebody who's, accountable and responsible for a data asset, but that moniker of owner is one that just perpetuates data hoarding and data silos all day long. I think it's the worst term or role that we've ever come up with in the world of data management. And so when I started looking across the way that other assets are managed, which is a big part of the book, I look at the way physical assets and financial assets and records management and human capital are all managed, and what we can learn from those ideas and bring them into the data management fold. One of those ideas is the concept that comes from financial management of the trustee. A trustee is somebody who is accountable and legally and ethically accountable and responsible for a particular asset, but they don't own it, right? They're the caretaker of it, but they don't necessarily own it. So I think that concept of a trustee or a fiduciary is one that we should be using instead of a data owner.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love it. I love your approach, because I've seen so many technical delivery teams, the data scientists come into battle with the data governance people. When
my data.
Exactly. Yeah. And when the data governance people see their job as saying no, saying no to use cases, saying no to new products, and you've completely flipped that dynamic, and you give everyone a unifying goal, and you challenge everyone to think about the value that can be acquired from the data through all different perspectives. I love it. I love it.
Thanks.
Next, I do have a couple other questions, which I'll ask you at the end. We'll go through a couple of the audience questions. But at the end, I want to ask you about the CDO certificate program that you're involved in now, which sounds super exciting. But from the audience, we have from Barry. Question is, where do you see data trusts, and in your view of data as an asset? So I think
data trusts. I'm not sure what he means by that.
Yeah, I think it'll be related to the data trustees, probably.
To the data trustee.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. I mean, I think the data trustee is somebody within the organization. It's not somebody outside the organization. We are seeing some examples of what I call an extended information ecosystem, where I, as a larger organization, a larger, maybe big retailer, am managing the data, the transaction data, the product information about the products from small suppliers, right? And becoming a center of gravity for that kind of master data. So in that regard, I become the trustee of data that is not necessarily mine, but that comes from my suppliers or partners. So we are starting to see that kind of extended ecosystem thing happening. I don't know if that answers the question, but it made me think of that concept.
That's fantastic. Oh, thanks. The next one's from Craig, asking about the changes in accounting standards. So when do you think accounting standards will change to allow data to be included in financial statements, especially when we see major US airlines refinancing based on their frequent flyer databases?
Somebody read my other Forbes article.
Hey, nice one.
So that's a great story there. Let me key in on that for a second. The airlines, particularly United Airlines and American and Delta here in the U.S., were having obviously some financial difficulties, are having financial difficulties due to the pandemic and people not flying. And so they needed to take out loans. Well, if you're an airline, what do you have to collateralize? Right? And the obvious answer is, they're airplanes. The problem is most airlines don't own the airplanes, they lease them. So you really can't collateralize a lease. So what do they own? They own customer data. They own their customer loyalty programs. And so these airlines all look to some banks to say, listen, we want to borrow from you, and all we really have to offer for collateral is, well, maybe some gate rights and things like that, but also our customer loyalty programs. And the valuation experts who looked at that data determined that the value of the customer loyalty programs was worth 2 to 3 times more than the companies themselves.
Amazing.
So United Airlines is worth about $9 billion. The value of their customer loyalty data was determined to be $20 to $30 billion. So the article that I wrote was, your company's data may be more valuable than your company itself. Yeah.
Amazing.
So, all right, back to the original question. Read me the original question again.
So it was, when do you think accounting standards will change to allow data?
So there have been some changes. Like if you're a data broker, if you're a company that is in the business of selling data and you purchase a database from another company, you actually now can, I think according to IFRS, can capitalize that or recognize it as an intangible asset with a straight line depreciation. But only for data, I've only seen that for data brokers so far. But other than that, I know that the accounting standards boards are discussing the matter of recognizing other kinds of intangibles, including data, but there's a lot of devil in the details there. How do you recognize it? When do you recognize its value? What method do you use? How do you record it? There's a lot of questions to be answered. So I would say let's not worry about what the accountants say. Let's worry about understanding internally the value of this data and maybe creating internal balance sheets for the value of data.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, when I was in banking, we were looking at ways to monetize the data and working with large corporations. We identified large businesses in Australia, where they were getting sometimes 20% of their revenue from interstate travel. And some of them were like themed restaurants and specific type of clothing shops and things like that. So we went to them with a partnership arrangement, because we could essentially say, we know which airlines most of that 20% of your revenue comes from, and they worked wonders. So everyone won. And Simone's asking about links to the articles, so we will get
Simone.
those.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, we'll put those on the show notes. Then we have a comment / suggestion from Atif saying, Doug, could we rename this webinar to data capitalization? Do you think this is a good verb to represent monetizing, managing, and measuring data?
Sure. I don't have any rights to the word Infonomics. I decided to keep it kind of like, I used to work for a gentleman called Bill Inman, who's known as the father of the data warehouse concept. And so I worked for his company called Prism Solutions. It's now part of, I think, IBM. And I asked him, Bill, why didn't you ever trademark the term data warehouse? He said, well, because then I'd be the only one who was using it. So, you'd rather be known as the father of the data warehouse concept. And for me, it's really, it's not about, my ideas. I'm quite keen to have others build on this idea. And this is why I teach this MBA class and this CDO class. I want people to build on these ideas. I can only take them so far, right? And my goal, my bucket list goal, is to have one of my students win a Nobel Prize in economics for kind of building on some of these ideas.
Amazing. And man, I gotta say, your Infonomics course on Coursera has amazing ratings.
Thank you. Yeah,
it's incredible. Yeah, and thousands of people.
I think about 10,000 people have taken it so far. It's a 2-part course, 4 weeks each. We go into the management, monetizing, and measuring data. There's now a capstone course as well, which is a full data monetization project.
Amazing. That is incredible. And also tell me about the Carnegie Mellon Chief Data Officer Certificate Program.
Yeah, so it's something we're just starting at Carnegie Mellon University, and it's a 6-month program, not every day, of course, but it's for chief data officers and aspirational chief data officers or data and analytics leaders. There's some networking involved, obviously, and courses on data science and data management and data visualization and data monetization, data literacy. It's going to be really, really excellent. So yeah, I'm excited.
Oh man, I'm super excited. I'm super excited. And is there anything that I haven't asked you about? Anything that you're seeing out there? Anything changes that might have surprised you? Anything that I haven't asked you about so far?
Yeah, let me think. We were going to talk a little bit about building and managing teams, and while I don't typically do that myself, I tend to try to surround myself by a lot of diversity. People who are young and old, or technical and non-technical, from different races and backgrounds and sexual orientations and everything. And it's not just for developing new ideas, but everybody brings a unique way of getting things done as well. So I really revel in all the new ideas. And I love that the University of Illinois' MBA and Masters of Accounting program, and the course I teach on Infonomics, brings in students from all over the world. I've had students from Russia and Mexico and Australia and Japan and China and Korea. And it's been amazing. And everybody brings unique ideas and perspectives that often I've never thought of. So,
man, that is incredible. That is incredible. Doug, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your approaches, your knowledge and insights. and thank you for all your contributions that you've given the industry over decades of extremely hard work. We are all better because of them, because of your contributions. So
Felipe,
thank
you're
you so
too
much.
generous. Very kind. Thank you very much.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
It is.
And
it
I
is
look forward to
fantastic.
engaging any of your listeners on an ongoing basis. People can reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect, ask any additional questions that you want. And always love to speak with people who have read the book and have some new ideas.
Amazing. So the book is Infonomics. We'll add the link in the show notes. There will be another book coming out, so we'll share that when it does come out. And
Thank you.
no, this has been fantastic. So Doug, thank you so much for your time. We're getting really nice comments saying very useful to hear all this. Love the session. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Stephanie.
you so much. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Simone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Have a great day.